my name is Justin, and these glasses aren't real. You know, My Hero Academia is really weird. I found it randomly one day when I was window shopping Crunchyroll for anything that wasn't my 18th rewatch of Dragon Ball Super. Then I stumbled upon it. Force Fairy 5! But then I decided to have some self-respect and watch My Hero Academia instead. Who am I kidding? I picked up a piece of popcorn off the floor and ate it like 2 weeks ago. I watched the first season and liked it okay. I saw some potential here and thought it might be worth it to keep watching, you know? But then I watched a few episodes of season 5 and just dropped it. To this day, I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because I didn't like the direction it was going in, or maybe it's because of how cringy the fan base felt. Okay, it was definitely the cringe. Then, for a while, it became my punching bag, getting to the point where I would send my friends Snapchats of me acting as Deku and screaming like a banshee dip in my car.
Number 15, Burger King, Fun Letter!
It was kind of obscene. After that, the manga ended, and I just remember the storm of people saying how bad the ending was. The weird thing about me is that I'm drawn to controversial endings like a moth to the cringe flame. Like, I only started watching Game of Thrones after it ended. It was a terrible decision, and I still regret it to this day. So I said, fuck it, and rewatched everything to the point where I stopped, and then watched everything that came out after. And you know what I learned? I stopped watching right when it gets good. So now I find myself making the My Hero video that I never thought I would. Despite the several times I've made fun of this series, I'm gonna be talking about it today. Everything that works, everything that doesn't, and everything in between. That's right, today we're talking My Hero Academia. So yeah, this should be cool. I don't have to impress you. Alright, so before we dive in, I think it's worth talking about the superhero genre first. See, I love me a good superhero story. There's something that really hooks me to stories about these larger-than-life figures with crazy powers beating the ever-living shit out of mostly the homeless. That said, I've always felt that the best superhero stories are the ones that show these gods among us are still only human. These accounts of heroes bearing the weight of the world on their shoulders, sacrificing their personal desires because of their duty to others, and even transmitting fatal STIs to their partner because they have radioactive spider semen. Man, the writers will really find any way to fuck Spider-Man's life up, huh? The problem, there are a shitload of superheroes out there. For every Superman, there's also Grasshopper, Big Bertha, Bible Man. Man, what the fuck? Point being, it's a genre with countless stories to tell. Many stories are great, have long stood the test of time, and are adored by millions of people. Most others are really weird, usually gross, and often cater to the gooner crowd. I mean, just look at Marvel Rivals. Hell, I've been wanting to make a video about the Section 8 comics for the longest time, and then I remember what Bueno Excelente does, and I decide, actually, I'm good. The point being, telling a unique, compelling story in this genre can be tough. Harder than that, though, is trying to tell a unique, compelling story in the most commonly used superhero narrative of all time. The origin story. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but this silly boy likes him some anime every now and then. So when I found out there was a superhero anime, it piqued my interest. I was really curious to see a Western-style property developed by Eastern minds. And the first taste of those worlds melding would come in the form of this story's protagonist. My Hero Academia is the origin story of the world's greatest hero, Izuku Midoriya, otherwise known as Deku. God, you have no idea how hard it is saying that line knowing the endless memes that have spawned from it. Simply put, Deku is a loser. In a world where nearly everybody is born with some kind of special ability, known here as quirks, he is one of the unlucky few who can't do shit. Worse still, he's a constant victim of, hey everybody, point and laugh. Even his nickname, given to him by an asshat named Bakugo, means useless. Despite this endless bullying, none of that was enough to discourage him. Behind the kid who couldn't do anything was a dream, an aspiration that motivated his every action. In Midoriya's mind, it didn't matter what other people told him, it didn't matter if they didn't believe in him. More than anything, he wanted to be a hero, the greatest hero. This was a want that stemmed from his admiration for one person, the #1 hero, All Might. All Might is pretty fascinating because of the archetype his character falls into, aka the strongest. He's a beacon of hope so great that his existence alone makes villains shit yourself. Now, you may find this hard to believe, but these characters are supposed to be strong as fuck. They are people so insanely powerful that the world bends to meet their standard, both figuratively and literally. Good Video Boy Alon Z made a video on the topic I recommend you check out to get the full picture. These people are the ones that others depend on, look up to, and strive to be like because of everything they represent. They are proof that anything is possible, that their light can permeate any darkness that comes their way. All Might means everything to this world because what he ultimately represents is peace. He carries every burden, never gives up, and doesn't rest because that is the kind of person he is. He is truly the strongest. But then there is the question that makes everything all the more interesting. What happens when the strongest is gone? This is the question the world would soon have to start asking because All Might got hit with a slam missile or some shit and now he's a dingus. As fate would have it, the world's greatest hero would meet the ultimate jabroni. Despite being an incredible underdog, Midoriya shows more heroism than anybody. In the eyes of the titan he looked up to, this child was worthy. And as a result, All Might would pass his torch to Midoriya and place the world's peace in his hands.
Hey, dingus! The next time you get in my business, I'll smash your scrawny ass into a Deku burger!
Did he just call me a dingus?
Do I hear a lover's quarrel?
Maybe. All Might, what are you doing here? How did you find me? Have you been following me?
You see, young man, I was just in the neighborhood, asking the kind children of this street if they could offer the symbol of peace some Percocet. With this comically large extra hole I've got, every little bit counts. Also, I am under legal obligation to tell you.
Never mind that. Why are you talking to me?
Well, young man, if I'm being honest with you, you taught me a great deal today.
I did?
Quite. After years of fighting countless bad guys and getting caught in scandals for viciously clobbering various homeless people by accident,
Various?
I've decided it's finally time to hang up my boots and entrust the future to the next generation to make sure that you too can rise to the occasion, keep the peace I've worked tirelessly to protect, and maybe knock a little sense into the guy who lives at the corner of the street about 2 blocks down.
Everything I thought I knew about you was a lie.
Bastard keeps snatching up all the Percocet. He's really more of a nuisance than anything. I don't even think anyone would miss him. Well, enough rambling. What do you say, young man? Young man? Young man?
To get from Knucklehead McSpazatron to Street Tier Terror, Midoriya enrolls in the prestigious UA. Here he meets the other losers who make up Class 1A, and together they train and hone their abilities to become the next generation of saviors. Simultaneously, the underground world of villains scheme to disrupt the status quo and bring chaos to the world. Their goal? To eradicate All Might. They then orchestrate an attack on the school and its heroes, bringing with them that guy who sold you weed once that served as the answer to the All Might problem. Although they're just a little extremely incompetent and somehow managed to lose the most winnable battle ever. Though, while they may have failed spectacularly, like wow, how embarrassing, they accidentally accomplished something else. As news of this attack spread, the world begins to wonder how an incident like this could happen. How was it in a world with All Might that the peace had been disturbed right under his nose? The people's faith had been rattled, and they now had to question if the peace they had come to know was really as secure as they thought. This experience makes Class 1A fully realize what kind of threat awaits their future. Unshaken in their resolve, this attack strengthens them and reminds them why they decided to walk this path in the first place. At the same time, the League wouldn't take this loss sitting down, with their rage and spite further strengthening their own resolve, and they vowed to end the age of the hero. Alright, so if I'm being honest, I have some pretty mixed feelings about this first arc. On one hand, the world and everything it brings with it is incredibly fascinating. You've probably heard people say that when everybody is special, nobody is special. The premise of this show, with a world full of quirks, is something I always felt would be difficult to juggle. That said, it's kind of impressive how they tackle it because, right from the get-go, the series makes sure you know that it's not about what you have, but what you do with what you have. Something I'm sure you've been told plenty of times. It's something we come to see more of in this series as we see these heroes' strength not coming from their powers, but from being able to confront themselves and emerge better from it. Speaking of, the cast of characters we have here is also a plus. For the most part. Alongside their actual quirks, they have their own personality quirks that make them stand out. There are a multitude of different characters and personalities here, each representing something distinct and giving a little bit more bite to the narrative. If there's one thing I respect My Hero a lot for, it's the fact that it really goes out of its way to give each of its characters their own moment. That doesn't mean that Sugar Man or Mount Shithead over here are exactly good characters, but they've got their own roles to fill within the story that makes them important? Giving this ensemble all these moments helps build our protagonist up by entrusting him with their hopes and dreams. However, this strength is also a weakness because juggling time amongst these characters makes it feel like we only ever go surface deep into these character arcs and themes. I couldn't help but feel like the series left potential nuance on the table, especially as the series went on. It can also make things really awkward when they don't touch characters like Tentacle, yes that's his name, and they use him as the centerpiece of this kind of weird racism arc they tackle later on. It's really bizarre. Then there's also the fact that we have like two and a half comedic relief characters. I'm not saying you can't have them, but when one of them is the dude who loves himself a little too much and the other one is the creepy pervert with the sticky balls, I really wish I proofread that sentence. It can get a little annoying. But you know where this arc really could have some depth and nuance? You know what I think is this arc's greatest failure? It's the villains. You've probably heard people say that a hero is only as good as his greatest villain, and these villains stink. Personally, I don't think there's any villain that bores me more than the one that is evil just because they woke up one day and felt like it. Now, every once in a while there is a situation where someone just simply is evil, and it's okay because it usually represents something more idealistic than an actual character. Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen is a good example. That guy just likes to step on people. Me though, I really like me some motives. My favorite villains are those who have a reason for their actions, driven by a twisted motivation that propels them forward towards their goals. And you know what I like even more than that? I like it when the villain's motive is almost understandable in some fucked up roundabout kind of way. I love the kind of villains that make you question your values and your beliefs. In other words, I love morally gray characters. These guys though, there's just nothing here. There's not much threatening about a group of chumps with a weird hand guy for a leader. Not to mention, he's a gamer. Shigaraki here thinks he's the shit when in actuality, he's not even the fart. Even with the Nomu, they're getting casually low-diffed by a bunch of doofuses who can barely tie their shoes, let alone defend themselves. Then that little bit of menacing aura they do have is literally shot down by some dude with a gun. Pro Hero Snipe over here is like, yeah, you got a quirk? Big whoop. I've got one too. It's called a 22 caliber. Get fucked. Overall, I'd say the balance of quality of this arc slants slightly more towards the positive. It was enough to hold my interest just because I saw the potential in the route they were trying to go in. There was hope that the areas lacking in development could be expanded upon. That and You Say Run hyped everybody, including me, out of their minds. So I decided to invest in the story for a little while longer instead of dropping it at the time and watching... Oh god, Berserk 2016? I want you to know that I spent several minutes writing this bit going back and forth wondering if I should poke fun at Berserk 2016 for the 20th time or expose myself for the weirdo I am and make the bit about Masugoken HXH. The joke is always gooning our guts. I have nothing else. I am a void of comedy. And you know what? I'm glad I did because the next part of this story is when I feel my hero really starts to find its footing.
Is that all you got, villain? Fuck! Kurogiri, what the hell are we even still doing here?
The beating, sir. You find it amusing.
Well, I mean, it is pretty funny.
You know what else is also pretty amusing? It's amusing.
But you don't get it, Kurogiri. I've spent every last second, every waking moment the last year planning, waiting for one simple thing. My entire existence feels called to fulfill the destiny I so desire, and I shall wait no longer. I'm like 2 games away from hitting Gold 3 in Marvel Rivals, and I'm unbelievably miffed that I am here beating up some kids and a homeless guy instead. I could be back at home exacting my revenge on that fucker, Big Booty Blaster 9000. Shit, now I just feel like killing somebody. How about we start with you? Whoa! Wow, isn't that adorable? Nomu, will you kindly reintroduce the homeless man with the floor? Make it intimate this time. Oh, fucking fuck.
Hey, asshole!
Huh?
I'm gonna fuck your face! Oh, shit.
I'm gonna kill the girl now.
Hey you, Mr. Hands over there. I hope you've had your fun because now I'm about to have mine. Because when I get down there, I am going to goatsy all your asses. Starting with the homeless man on the floor!
This video is sponsored by Horsemeat. Hello, dear viewer. Welcome back to another channel membership ad spot, where, over the next minute, I try to convince you to spend money on me. With one JustinSVA channel membership, you can get exclusive content, exclusive polls, early releases, video credits, horse burgers, and horse kebabs. Thank you for your support. This was a message from the Horse Meat Company. Hey, so you know how I mentioned these characters had the development of a wet sack of potatoes? Well, thankfully, we start to see some growth on that front here in the Sports Festival arc. The Sports Festival is a yearly event that the school hosts to showcase the up-and-coming heroes for the world to see, opening the door for opportunities as pros scout the least terrible options for their agencies. That's all fine and dandy, but I'm honestly just here for the tournament at the end. Boy, do I love me a good tournament. This isn't the central focus of the arc, though. No, what this arc wants to center around is a character that we don't know much about yet, but becomes a cornerstone of every arc that follows. Shoto Todoroki is one of my favorite characters in the series. Up until this point, we really haven't seen all that much of him. His most memorable moment is using this goofy-ass ice costume he made for himself. Also, his favorite food is soba. Isn't that neat? What we do know about him, though, is that he has the OP as fuck ability to control both fire and ice. However, it's clear that there's a weakness that chews away at him. There's something that makes him distance himself from the rest of the world. The irony was that Shoto's power and trauma stem from the same place. His father, the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Here's the one thing you need to know about Endeavor. He's a total dick, man. We see how Endeavor relentlessly forced his son through hell and back from an early age. He tormented him, forcing him to train until he couldn't stand anymore. He was treated differently, not being able to be with his family because they were beneath him. This was the agony Todoroki faced every day, and it was all for Endeavor's selfish goal. The number 2 hero carried an envy for that top spot he felt he couldn't reach. No matter how hard he pushed himself, there was a gap between the two that never seemed to shrink. If anything, it only widened with each passing day. So he decided if he couldn't become the number 1 hero, he would mold the next one. To Endeavor, Shoto wasn't anything more than a tool, the means to the end of his ambition. Endeavor says it himself. It's the only reason Shoto was created. However, Endeavor's failure to account for his son, his family, and their well-being cost him everything. Endeavor may have been a hero, but within the 4 walls of the Todoroki household, he was the worst kind of villain. He felt that all the trauma he experienced, every hardship he endured, was his father's fault. Because of this, Shoto refuses to use his abilities to their fullest extent, only going as far as using his mother's ice and never his father's flames. At the sports festival, however, he would reluctantly reunite with the father he's come to loathe so much. This encounter leaves Shoto shaken, and it becomes clear to his classmates that something is bothering him. Nobody knows what to do or say. It's then that somebody steps up to save Shoto from himself. If there's one huge thing that a lot of superhero properties don't do nearly enough, it's make their characters resonate with the audience in a key but subtle way. Of course, we all love the face-offs with the big bads, putting an end to the grand schemes. It's a staple of the genre. But I love these little moments when a hero goes out of their way to save somebody who is fighting themselves. This is something that My Hero does masterfully, especially in the fight between Midoriya and Todoroki. This is a battle of attrition, with Midoriya sacrificing his well-being just to talk with Todoroki. With every attack, Deku finds himself one step closer to the edge, and he's about to break. Right at that breaking point though, Midoriya cries out and demands Todoroki's best. He would refuse any outcome if Todoroki didn't give everything. After all, the flames he kept locked away weren't his father's, nor was the ice his mother's. Midoriya reminded Todoroki that his abilities belonged only to him. Using them didn't mean taking one side or the other, but that he was using his own strength. Shoto then decides to push past his trauma, unleashing his flames and his true self. This overwhelming might is enough to take Midoriya out, allowing Todoroki to not only move on to the next round, but also to the next stage of his evolution. I really like this dynamic of Shoto's character. It displays how Shoto's past traumas bind him and how he can't seem to overcome them. Yet, it's also a reminder that, despite these setbacks, we have to move on or risk robbing ourselves of our full potential. We can so easily fall into what's comfortable and never make the difficult choices that lead to our growth and evolution. We eventually become our own worst enemies, an obstacle on our path forward. That's when those around us come and remind us that the past isn't what defines you. Nothing in your life is set. Only you can choose who you want to be. It's with that realization that you can become the master of your own destiny and blossom into the next version of yourself, the person you've always wanted to become. However, for every person who wants to save you, there will always be another who imposes their ideals onto you. The hero killer Stain is easily one of the series' most interesting villains. For being a crazed, murderous psychopath who's missing his schnoz, dude's got that aura, which is more than I can say about the other villains we've met up until this point. Like the other villains, he also despises the world he lives in. Seeing the heroes running around sickens him to his very core. He decides that he will be the change this world needs, tearing it down and slaughtering those who don't fit within his ideal image. The difference is that at this point in the story, the other villains do what they do because it's another day that ends in Y. The hero killer, on the other hand, does this because he believes that the so-called heroes have lost their way. He sees how the heroes roaming the streets are more interested in fame, glory, and money than being actual heroes. To him, this was an injustice that he would attend to in the most brutal of ways, snuffing out the lives of those he deemed unworthy or fakes, to make sure that only the truest and pure of heroes remained. One of those victims would be, how do you pronounce that? Ingenium? One of those victims would be Ingenium, Ida's older brother. Ida's part in this story is yet another great play into the human element in the hero dynamic. The reason? Ida is so miffed that he completely casts aside being a hero for the sake of revenge. Like, he pretty much tells Stain, hey buddy, nothing personal. Actually, psych.
I'm about to give you a colonoscopy with a spoon!
Which, as it just so happens, is just the kind of hero that Stain hates the most. In a moment of weakness, Ida chooses to walk the dark path, displaying a hypocrisy that even the villain sees. It's only after he is saved by Midoriya and Todoroki that Ida comes to realize just how wrong he was. He was walking the same path as Stain, enacting his own justice on others, whether they deserved it or not. While, ironically, Stain acknowledges Midoriya and Todoroki's heroism and selflessness for standing up against him and trying to save their friend. So Ida decides that no more bloodshed will come his friend's way. They were all in this mess because of his selfishness, and now he would be fighting to save them. He would sacrifice himself as much as he could to defeat the hero killer and protect his friends. Together they succeed and end Stain's maniacal spree. Ida's arc in the hero killer saga further pushes this idea that even the best of us still have our faults. Sometimes even those who save others need to be saved from themselves. In this fateful encounter, it was ironically a villain's twisted sense of justice that showed him the true path of a hero. This also begins a trend that I really like in storytelling and something that My Hero is pretty damn good at: Consequential storytelling. This is when the consequences of this arc bleed into the next. Unlike other stories where the arc ends, everything resets, and there are no ramifications in the subsequent arcs. When done poorly, it can feel like the payoff you spent all this time waiting for was pointless. I'm looking at you, Dragon Ball Super. But this show does it great. Stain's philosophy actually has a massive ripple effect in this world. There's this weird deep web looking ass video when he was tweaking out and preaching some cringe that would be the catalyst for other villains, those wanting to carry out his mission, to emerge from the shadows. Stain's defeat signals the turning of the tide, no matter how lame some of these dudes might be. Like seriously, what is up with the Gecko dude? With them, the League of Villains is rebuilt, and a new plan is set in motion. At the head of the table is a mysterious entity that kicked off this war in the first place. He is the foil to All Might's peace. He is the symbol of fear. I've got to say, everything up until this point has been pretty aight, but definitely lacking. We've made some progress, but the main issue is that we still got underdeveloped one-dimensional characters. Like a Burger King burger, they have far too few layers to be satisfying and also taste like raw horse ass. However, this is when we reach a point that shifts gears, that's a little foreshadowing joke from me to you, that gives the narrative some bite. A Big Mac, if you will. It begins with Class 1A heading to a hidden... You have no idea how hard that is to say. It begins with Class 1A heading to a hidden training camp to develop their quirks. However, the new League of Villains ambushes them. They attack the heroes while chasing down one student whom they see as an opportunity. The explosive hero Katsuki Bakugo, planning to capture and recruit him. Despite some of them getting their shit wrecked by some pants-shitting children, they succeed and take off, leaving the students rattled and the rest of the world filled with dismay. The League was successfully unraveling the society they wanted to change, giving rise to chaos and unrest. Plus, they now had the opportunity to transform a promising hero into a detestable villain. Bakugo listens to the villains prattle off their ideology, spouting nonsense in the hopes of making this boy see the world from their perspective. They notice his demeanor, his anger, his pride, and see a villain in the making. But they couldn't be more wrong. That burning passion wasn't a weakness to be exploited, it was the fuel to his fire. I haven't really had the chance to talk about Bakugo yet, but he is such a dynamic character in this series that he is right there with Todoroki as my favorite. At this point, what we know about Bakugo is that he's kind of a dick. Bakugo is a bashful, spiteful kid with a colossal chip on his shoulder. Born with a powerful quirk and put on a pedestal from an early age, all he's ever known is life at the top. He's aware of his potential and knows how valuable he is, but has only one desire: to become the next #1 hero. This desire pushes him past his limits and makes him evolve, elevating him further into greatness. Though it's not that massively inflated ego that places him in the ridiculous scenarios he finds himself in. It's his iron will to improve. He challenges himself beyond what any sane person would consider reasonable because he knows the only way to achieve his potential is to be stronger and braver than every other hero. To put it simply, the easy route is never an option for him. Bakugo would never be a villain in this story because there is only one spot for him: the top hero in the world. It's a layer to him that really changes the way you perceive him, and it's just the beginning of an even better character that we come to see. After Bakugo rejects the League's offer, the heroes would arrive to rescue him. However, unknown to them, a character lurking in the shadows finally unveils himself. One for All has arrived, and the showdown between him and All Might, his arch-nemesis, begins. The battle is close, with All for One more than All Might can handle. However, All Might digs deep, rekindles his flame, and deals the decisive blow. Here it comes. Yet, even though the symbol of fear lies defeated, he may have been the true victor. Making the #1 hero overexert himself, Toshinori Yagi was All Might no more. The symbol of peace was gone, and the void left behind was immeasurable. Society was shaken even further, stirred by the consequences of a world without their greatest hero. And sure enough, this would be when yet another evil would awaken from the underground.
Thank God! There's some actual meat worth beating now! I was getting real tired of pounding the dipshit brigade you all sent my way.
How is this possible? I thought you were dead! They found your body right there at the site of the horse meat incident!
What the fuck is the horse meat incident?
Well, doesn't matter anyway. Right now I'm tweaking so hard that my teeth itch, and I'm not in the mood to chat with a walking, talking chode. So I'm just going to reintroduce your ass to my fist!
Hey, All Might! Have you ever heard a compounded gorilla fart at 30 decibels? I've spent the last 2 years collecting the silliest quirks I could find, just to humiliate you in the goofiest way possible. Do I need the quirk that gives me 24/7 cable access to Mr. Bean? Not really. I do just think it's funny.
Oh god, he's fucking dead!
Ha! Take that, you nematode!
I think I can honestly say that if it wasn't for Overhaul and his saga, I probably would have dropped the series around this point. As captivating as the events of the Camino incident were, this arc to me is the most gripping narrative we've seen play out thus far. Kai Chisaki is the head of a Yakuza group known as the Shiai Hisaikai, a once prosperous group that lost its luster and began to fade away. However, Chisaki, in debt to this group for saving his life, desires nothing more than to reclaim the Shiai Hisaikai's glory, no matter the cost. He possesses a twisted philosophy that makes him see the rest of the world as a bunch of filthy lobotomites. He witnesses a society riddled with self-righteousness, and that's a lot of S's, and seeks to dismantle and reshape it in his image. This is ironic considering the nature of Overhaul's quirk, the ability to break apart and reassemble anything he touches. Having a person physically manifest their ideals is sick, and I need to give props to Koei Hirokoshi for developing it the way he did. That's pretty cool. Though there's one extra thing that makes this quirk in particular stand out. Throughout My Hero, there's usually an asterisk tied to everyone's abilities. Most users that can manipulate or control things can do so to anything they like, except for organic life. Overhaul, on the other hand, and quite literally might I add, can freely use his quirk to tear anything or anyone apart and put them back together. This means he can turn you into goop in the blink of an eye, or worse still, torment you with a never-ending cycle of pain and cruelty. There is no line he will not cross to see his future play out, even if it means putting a helpless child at the center of it. Eri is both the centerpiece and the emotional anchor of this story. She is this girl with a mysterious yet powerful quirk that both the heroes and villains chase. She knows nothing but suffering day in and day out, constantly awaiting the worst, both for her and those who wanted to help her. Anybody who had lent out a helping hand was eradicated, blown apart in an instant, just for trying. Not only did she feel helpless, but now she felt responsible. Overhaul convinces her that all those senseless deaths were her fault, that she was a cause because she wouldn't just play her part. She believed that she was a curse, a plague that did nothing but worsen the lives of those around her. So she'd comply, allowing herself to be subjected to agony just so no one else would have to get hurt. If she was ever going to get out of this hell, she needed somebody to save her not only from Overhaul, but from herself. Guys, let's talk about Lemillion for a second. Goofy name aside, it's kind of outstanding how strong of a character Mirio is, considering the short time there is to build him up. The hook with him, though, is how he's always been the underdog. He was born with a quirk called Permeation, which allowed him to freely move through anything. While it sounds cool and powerful, the catch is that the quirk is extremely difficult to control. He often got stuck in walls or just fell through the ground by accident. He was a laughingstock, with all his peers seeing him and his quirk as useless. But all that ridicule didn't discourage him. Instead, he uses it as motivation to become the hero he has always wanted to be. Mirio harnesses and cultivates this power, pouring everything he has into mastering it. The quirk that once got him mocked is now one that can make him nearly invincible. Mirio is the epitome of hard work paying off. Achieving this feat not only elevates his abilities, but also inspires others to equal heights. He is every bit the hero he claims to be, forcing himself through thick and thin to help those in need. And now he felt no one needed his help more than Eri. If there's one theme that really shines through this arc, it's the theme of self-sacrifice. Countless times we've seen our heroes throw themselves headfirst into dangerous situations, getting beaten and battered and forced to prove themselves only to emerge victorious by the skin of their teeth. It creates some truly defining character moments for Sun Eater and Red Riot, but there's undoubtedly no place we see that tenacity more than in the battle between Lemillion and Overhaul. Despite Overhaul's incredible power, he is jobbing hard to Lemillion. Although Lemillion's quirk countered Overhaul's as well as it did, it was his sheer will and determination that were his greatest assets. Lemillion battles with everything he has because saving Eri meant everything to him. Unfortunately, the source of his strength would also be his downfall. With Overhaul nearing defeat, he makes one more desperate play to shift the scales. Using a quirk erasing bullet made from Eri's blood, Overhaul forces Lemillion into an ultimatum. Knowing that Lemillion could simply permeate through the bullet, the villain decides to fire at Eri instead. Despite sacrificing all those years he spent building himself, bettering himself, and making himself worthy of being called a hero, Lemillion doesn't hesitate. He takes the bullet for Eri, losing his quirk and now facing Overhaul without it. So you can only imagine the sheer embarrassment when Overhaul still gets his candy ass slapped around by a powerless Lemillion. Dude has all the hacks, but Lemillion just has that dog in him. Ultimately, it didn't matter if Lemillion lost his quirk. He recognized that it wasn't his power that he spent all this time cultivating. It was himself. It wasn't his quirk that made him strong. It was his heart. Mirio was the kind of person whose back could be up against the wall, but he would still stand up and fight for what he believed in, no matter how many times he fell. He shows that the only ceiling we have is the one we put on ourselves. He's a reminder that our best qualities aren't what define us. It's what we choose to define us. And if you believe in yourself, there is no glass ceiling you can't break. Slowly but surely, Mirio is whittled down by Overhaul's onslaught, doing everything in his power to make sure not even a scratch comes Eri's way. It's here that the tide of the battle shifts once more, and the other heroes join the fight. Midoriya, now taking over, still has one big problem. Dude can't throw a punch without becoming a human paperweight afterward. This, alongside his recklessness, makes him a liability that needs to be saved rather than doing the saving himself. This is where Eri's piece in the puzzle finally kicks in. Overhaul once again reminds Eri that all this pain and suffering is because of her. He reminds her that she is nothing more than a plague on society, and the only way to break this curse is to surrender to him. Midoriya tells Eri that couldn't be further from the truth, seeing firsthand how somebody bestowed with something people deem a curse can become a blessing. Her destiny was always in her own hands. She just had to be brave, take that step forward, and embrace the person that she wanted to be. It's a really great moment when Midoriya not only saves her from Overhaul's grasp, but also from herself. With Eri's newfound confidence, she utilizes her power on Midoriya, stabilizing him at 100% without him self-destructing. The next thing we know, Midoriya is making Overhaul see God. In the aftermath, however, there was one casualty.
I've had just about enough of you, hero. The problem with you is I don't think you know who you're dealing with. So, let me tell you exactly who I am. I'm the kind of man who picks Ryu in Street Fighter and only uses Hadoukens. I'm the kind of man who loses his virginity just to take it back. I'm the kind of man who merges into traffic without looking just because I think it's funny.
You monster!
Ever since that horsemeat incident, this filthy world has lost its way. It's in need of a cleanse, and that girl is the key.
Well, too bad, numbnuts. I don't care what you're trying to do. I won't let you hurt this girl anymore. Oh, wow. So this is what it feels like to be useful.
Numbnuts, who do you think you are? Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the crunk one, and I won't let some 2D2 dipshits get in my way. Prepare, hero, for I am going to shit yourself.
Just like the horsemeat incident.
Oh my god! Did you feel that?
No, but that's mostly because I've been bleeding out for the last 20 minutes. Seriously, for the love of God, I'm gaping here. I need some help.
I haven't brought up Sir Nighteye at all, but he is one of the best things to come out of this arc. He is the former sidekick to All Might, a pro hero with the ability to see people's futures. While this makes him interesting from a hero standpoint, I think it's much more fascinating to see how this quirk plays into the narrative element. Despite having such a powerful and useful quirk, he appears afraid to use it unless necessary. This fear stems from a trauma that caused his and All Might's separation long ago. In the past, Nighteye rushed to All Might's side after being beaten. He's clearly exhausted, barely able to stand, but promises that he's fine. He was the symbol of peace and needed to protect it no matter his condition. Nighteye sees all this and tells him that he's running himself into an early grave. He then uses his foresight and sees All Might's future, a future that shows his brutal demise, and pleads with All Might to retire and live a peaceful life. His foresight had never been wrong before, and he was sure it was impossible to bend the future he saw. Of course, All Might refuses. He still feels he has a duty to the people who cry out his name and need to be saved. He can't simply turn away from them. Nighteye sees the same fate for Midoriya during his battle with Overhaul, as Midoriya's future shows yet another tragic, horrific outcome. Despite his warning, Midoriya also refuses to quit. He too feels he carries a duty beyond himself, and right now it was to this one little girl who needed his help. He didn't care what the future was because he was ready and willing to push himself beyond any limit to do the impossible, even if it meant bending the future. With his unbreakable resolve, he does the impossible and changes his destiny. As a result, Nighteye comes to realize that the word impossible has no meaning to those who are determined enough to make it possible. No future is set in stone. Your destiny is something you shape and mold. It's after Nighteye comes to this revelation that he sees the world differently, with a newly found faith for the future he worries about so often. Because of that, the man infamous for not smiling could now rest easy. A smile on his face as he faded away from the world. This is an incredibly well-structured arc that introduces new characters who reinforce the development of the current ones. It's also the strongest thematically, being a heartfelt showcase of the core themes of My Hero Academia. That being, what does it truly mean to be a hero? Alongside this theme is the human element. We see how there are those around you who want to save you from yourself. People who see everything you are and choose to believe in the best of you. At the same time, there are those of us who are consumed by the worst part of ourselves. Those of us who want to do something good but go about it the wrong way. What's important though is that there's always a choice. There's no set path that you must follow. There is no predetermined future that you must navigate. Your destiny is what you make of it. It's up to you to become who it is you want to be. God damn, wait, that would have been a better ending statement for the last section. God, I am terrible at writing.
Sup, guys? I'm dying now.
But you only had one line in the last bit. You can't die yet.
Sucks, I know, but after eating so many burgers that made my belly burst, I think it's about time that I go.
Wait, so you mean you're not dying from all that shit Overhaul did to you?
No. But here's the good news. The world is in good hands. I believe in the both of you to protect the peace and uphold the society that we hold so dear. I know what comes next, and I know that everything you've worked hard for, everything you fought for, will come true. Jimmy.
Who's Jimmy?
Wait, are you not? Oh, hold on a second. Oh God!
What is it?
Nothing! You're all good. You're all good, Mario. You're gonna do just fine. Yeah. You might want to stay away from hot dogs from now on.
What?
Okay, gonna die now. Whee!
God, he's so hot.
Alright, so season 4 was pretty damn good. I kinda skipped past the gentle criminal and school festival stuff because I feel like it awkwardly breaks down the great tension we just built up, but that's just my opinion. Please don't throw away the rest of the review because I thought this guy was kind of a lame-o. I'm not apologizing for the school festival stuff though, that shit is rank. That said, The potential I felt from the beginning of the show was finally starting to shine through. But even with that shine, I couldn't help but notice that the early stages of season 5 were just not grabbing my attention. The anime has an annoying habit of starting each season with a class quirk recap, so I kind of feel like the show is treating me like I have the memory of a half-dead chimp, barely able to breathe without choking on my own spit. Which props to the show for catching on, that's actually a very accurate description of me. It just feels like a waste of time, and after the 5th time, it really starts to get old. If only that was all there was to it though. You know what you always hate to see? When something you really like suddenly becomes cringe. I think it was around this point that the general perception of My Hero went from being, hey, that's pretty good, to, hey, isn't that the guy in the Todoroki Gives Birth Alone video? It kinda sucks I even have to talk about this, but the series is now forever interlocked with that perception. Like, My Hero is legitimately infamous for being so cringe that people who have never seen it dunk on it for simply existing. And I get it, it's cringe enough that Pro Hero Wash exists. But it's even worse when you're trying to defend the series to your friends and you suddenly stumble into a Wash thirst trap. I mean, I know everybody has their kinks, but what in the hell is even going on here? My friend Ben, who knows I'm working on this video, has constantly been sending me videos of some guy on TikTok acting a scene where Bakugo drinks Deku's nut, and then sends me his own audition based off that TikTok.
I want more than anything to drink his nut.
Thank you, Ben. You're making it so much easier to recommend this show.
Deku, what are you doing, you nerd? I was just hoping that maybe you would like to try a new recipe of mine. Okay. I call it my man gravy.
Hell, when I told my teenage brother, who has never seen the show, that I was making a video about My Hero, his exact response was, why are you making a video about that cringe? Which, coming from a Naruto fan, I find to be quite humorous. Now, I personally don't care about being a fan of something that has a cringy fan base. I'm a Dragon Ball fan for God's sakes. So it always sucks to see people missing out on a good story, or worse still, dropping it because they got embarrassed, just because of the problematic 1% of the fan base that every popular franchise includes. What's funny is, I speak from experience because this is what made me drop the series originally, and made me miss out on some of the best the series had to offer. Alright, so get this. In the 4 years after I dropped the show, my perception of it became a video featuring a guy glorifying My Hero before a screening of Dragon Ball Super Superhero.
One for all, fall cowling, Detroit Smash!
Unironically, this clip was the first thing I dropped into my Premiere Pro timeline. So in the back of my mind, I've had it that this was the very thing I was fighting against. This was the perception I had to change.
What the hell?
I truly felt I was fighting an unwinnable battle.
Deku, I need you to smell my fart. Smell your fart, Koch-chan. I don't know if I can do that. I believe in you, Deku. Oh, okay. Well, I can try. Wow, Koch-chan. It smells really good. Thanks, Deku.
What sucked most, though, was that the discourse around the show was no longer about the show itself. Now, it was only about the litany of cringe it spewed from its festering cringe maw. It wasn't fun to be a part of, and the show itself wasn't engaging enough to get past that break-even point for me. So I wouldn't come back to it until much later on. So I think now would be a good time to take a break from this discussion and go into a significant part of My Hero that I haven't quite talked about yet. Kohei Horikoshi is nothing more than a humble fan of properties like One Piece, Naruto, and Dragon Ball? Ha! I knew there was a reason the series caught my attention. Dragon! Rock the Dragon! Dragon Ball Z! I hurt myself doing that. Growing up, he loved to draw and was motivated to pursue a career as a mangaka. At first, things seemed to have started off pretty well for him, submitting an entry to Jump and winning with his one sole submission. He would eventually go on to create his own one-shots and other serialized properties until he reached an impasse. His second series, Barrage, would be cancelled after just 2 volumes. He fell into a depressive slump, wondering what step he needed to take to save his young career. that's when he decided to revisit one of his prior works. This one-shot would serve as the foundation for the series that has blossomed into the massively successful franchise it is today. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why is it that I'm talking about Horikoshi now? Well, don't fucking ask, I don't really know. And that largely has to do with the parallels of his life and this story. Horikoshi had always shown immense potential to grow and evolve into a great. Still, he only reached that potential when he had his back against the wall. It just seems kind of ironic that he, much like the characters he wrote, found themselves at their best when at their most desperate. The amusing thing is that I dropped the series right at the turning point, where the greatness shifted from a gleaming ember that showed itself every once in a while to a blazing fire that made me think, wow, this is actually making me emotional, isn't it? And that turning point would begin with the My Villain Academia arc. This arc marks a massive shift in the narrative. It focuses on the villains, giving them something they didn't have before. Characterization! We get to see this group of villains climb out of despair, going through hell and back, all for the sake of their ideals. These ideals are revealed and established in the villains' backstories. And because we're able to establish them in this way, it further builds the credibility they crave. They go from being a bunch of smelly chuckle fucks to, oh shit, that dude just vaporized a city. This all leads us back to a discussion we had about 7 years ago regarding the hero only being as good as his greatest villain. Incidentally, this arc not only builds our villains, but forces our heroes to rise to the occasion. The two groups create a meaningful foil for each other that feels impactful. It's here that Shigaraki in particular begins his journey into becoming this world's reckoning.
Leader, I hope this whole thing is going just dandy for you, because let me tell you, I've been finding God throughout this entire experience.
Wait, I thought you were a Buddhist.
Exactly.
They called me crazy for putting 3,000 hours into Dota. Look where it's got me now. All that time grinding in the lab is finally paying off against Gigantomachia. Who's the loser now, Dad?
Hey, has anyone else been getting those messages telling you that there are hot babes in your area?
Yes, I started getting them right after I googled what goatsy was.
Oh man, then they've got to be around here somewhere. Here, let's give it a try. Hey, sugar! My balls don't work so good, and I have just enough money to split a McChicken. Where do you want to meet?
So, this is what accounts for flattery these days, huh?
Damn, guys! She sounds hot.
No, you fucking ninny! I'm not your fleshlight! I tapped your phone so I could threaten you!
Listen, I didn't even need the full hour. How much would you charge me for like 3, maybe 5 minutes?
Ah, God. Fine. Just look at this.
Oh my God! Are those monkeys fighting? I hope they just tear each other up to shreds.
What a bunch of amateurs. Those monkeys don't even know how to meter burn.
Oh, shit. Fuck. Hold on. That's the wrong video. Give me a second.
Never before in my days have I seen such a fucked up spectacle of a sight. God have mercy on us all. All might is gone, y'all. We're fucked. We're so fucking fucked. What the fuck are we gonna do now? If only we had a guy with an obnoxiously long pointy nose with red hair who looks like a total dunce to save us.
Ah! Guys, does anybody have Nigel Thornberry's number?
No, I think he's talking about Phineas Flynn.
Just imagine all the sucking and the fucking that could be going on if you just stop playing hard to get, lady.
I know that voice.
Huh? I never thought I'd see the day when the voice would come back to haunt me. Yet here he is, flapping his rotten gums, disguising himself as a sexy lady on Twice's phone. I know you. I know you better than anybody. You're the bastard who took everything away from me. Everything I worked so tirelessly for, every dream I ever had was taken from me by you. He's the unforgivable scum I will loathe from the bottom of my putrid, festering, rancid heart until the day I draw my last breath. He is the very devil himself. Big Booty Blaster 9000!
How's your mother doing, by the way, Shigaraki? You know, after I plowed her.
Fuck
you!
Every so often, you'll get these insane moments in anime and manga that completely turn a narrative on its head. Think the Shibuya incident of Jujutsu Kaisen, for example. And this story has Shigaraki's awakening in the Paranormal Liberation War arc. What's crazy about this arc is that, by this point, we have already seen the pinnacle of good and evil in this world take each other out. We have established that this degree of strength was no longer present. However, in the midst of a raid by the heroes to stop Shigaraki from being elevated to a new degree of power by fucking Dr. Eggman, they fail and awaken him. So Shigaraki pumps his arms up to jerk mode and decides to disintegrate an entire mountain and nearby city into dust. I don't know how they did it, but the show somehow managed to power creep his threatening aura to go from that of the video of the orangutan driving a golf cart to the orangutan demanding food. I feel like I always manage to sneak monkeys into these videos, and I swear it's only slightly on purpose. I just find them really funny. Not to mention, this Shigaraki now carried the quirk of All for One, meaning that he was a god in the realm of ants, ready to step on them at his whim. Worse still was a goal instilled in him by All for One. Reclaim the quirk that started all of this in the first place. One for all. The battle that ensues is easily the best in the series to this point. The stakes, the drama, the action, the choreography, the psychology, it's all there. And it really does feel like we've reached the climactic showdown we've all been waiting for. The crazy part is that, after a world of hurt and a ton of damage, they are actually able to take him down. That is, until the other hands at play re-establish themselves. All for One, just at the point of Shigaraki's defeat, takes over and controls things enough to the point where the League can retrieve and save their leader. They too barely manage to make it out, sacrificing everything they have to make sure Shigaraki can fight another day. However, in this defeat emerges one member still holding on to a sinister trump card. He who promises to engulf the hero world in flames and see his ideals through, no matter the cost. Endeavor is Japan's #2 hero. He is a bastion of strength with numerous feats to his name, who is lauded and respected as one of the greatest heroes of all time. Despite that, this hero seems to care about only one thing: the gap between him and All Might. To him, it's like a wide gorge he can't cross, a goal he can never reach. In his eyes, the symbol of peace was not only untouchable, but someone who seemed to get further and further away with each step he took. Yet, he refuses to stop striving for it. He fights to do the impossible and challenges everybody who says otherwise, becoming obsessed with finally seizing that top slot and cementing himself as the greatest hero. It's because of this pursuit that my personal favorite story in the series begins, that being the story of the Todoroki family. The Todoroki family saga very well might be the best thing to come out of My Hero Academia. It's an amazing arc that excellently portrays human weakness and error in our heroes, showing how even within the best of us lies the potential for malice. It's a story of irony, how the hero Endeavor, one of the greats who has saved countless lives from evil, was the very evil that destroyed his home and turned everyone's lives into a living hell. This results in one of the best Sins of the Past storylines I have seen in quite some time. An arc that really made me question a lot of the dynamics of the society and just how far someone is willing to go to pursue their dreams. When we're introduced to the quiet, stoic Shoto Todoroki of Class 1A, the only thing we really know about him is that he's so powerful that he's already putting pro heroes to shame. We come to learn, though, that his past is marred by trauma brought about by the man responsible for him in the first place, Endeavor. He harbored a resentment towards his father and everything he stood for because, even though he may have been a hero, Enji Todoroki was responsible for tearing his family apart. Earlier, I mentioned how Endeavor decided that if he couldn't reach #1, then he would be responsible for the one who could achieve that goal. He decided to enter a marriage with the sole purpose of combining his and his wife's quirk, to manufacture the perfect hero. Combining his intense flames with an ice that could temper and regulate them, Endeavor could craft the perfect harmony of abilities that could surpass even his own. However, striking this balance would prove to be difficult. The children he had didn't hit that balance of abilities to reach their maximum potential, leading to disappointment after disappointment. And so he would move on to the next, hoping that this next one would be the one to carry his dreams. This toxic cycle created a loveless household where neglect and violence were all that the family ever knew. Eventually, the child of Enji's dreams was born, and his name was Shoto. The tragedy was that the sorrow didn't stop afterward. Shoto was raised apart from the rest of his family, being the prodigy child who received all his father's attention while the others were forgotten. It was a broken home where strength mattered more than compassion, where dreams took precedence over family, and beneath it all was pain. A darkness that surrounded this home that nobody had the courage to combat. Fast forward to the Camino incident. All Might faces off against All For One in a climactic showdown where All Might just narrowly emerges victorious. However, the battle exacts a heavy toll. As All Might raises his fist in victory, it was clear that this was it. This was the end of the beloved hero who brought peace to the world. His job was done, and now a void was left behind for somebody else to fill. And All Might's spot had to be Endeavor. Enji detested this sudden shift. He wanted to be the #1 hero, but not like this. He wanted to earn All Might's rank more than anything. He wanted to be able to say that he was better. It was a slap in the face to everything he had poured himself into, only to be handed the position because All Might couldn't carry it anymore. The already broken man only began to break more because he knew that even still, that gap was far too vast. He couldn't carry the torch and be the one people looked at as their savior. With All Might gone, the people's collective fears begin to grow, wondering if Endeavor could genuinely be the people's champion, one to raise their spirits and uphold the prosperity that the symbol of peace brought them. Endeavor recognizes this and sets his sights on a new goal: to become that beacon of hope, the shining light that people could follow to move towards a better tomorrow. There's just one tiny, teensy little problem. He doesn't know how to do that. He had spent his entire life living selfishly, chasing his dream and casting everybody else aside in that pursuit. He needed to learn how to make other people's dreams come true if he was going to take on this responsibility as the #1 hero. As a result, he started to change. He would put his all into becoming not only a better hero, but a better person. To do this, he needed to go back and fix his biggest failure: his home. Try as he might, Endeavor couldn't succeed. There was too much hurt, too much to make up for, too many sins that not even a lifetime of atonement could fix. Some family members wanted to heal and leave the past behind, yet others couldn't stand to even look at the devil trying to make amends. Even if Endeavor wanted to fix things, even if he could reconcile, there was one unforgivable sin that would weigh over their family forever, and his name was Toya. Being the firstborn child of the Todoroki family, Toya was Endeavor's first chance at fulfilling his wish. Yet, he was the furthest thing from what he wanted. Toya was a cursed child, possessing flames that burned more fiercely than his father's, yet with the body meant to control the cool ice of his mother. This meant that his body was fundamentally incompatible with his quirk, and in Endeavor's eyes, this child could never be All Might's successor. Despite already being deemed a failed experiment, Toya still wanted to make his father proud and become the #1 hero. He would train every day to enhance his flames and prove to his father that he was worthy. Honestly, all Toya ever wanted was for his father to acknowledge him. Despite his physical limitations, Toya ignored the fact that his body couldn't handle his quirk. He would train so hard that he'd come back burned and scarred, completely destroying himself and, in the process, causing his parents to worry about his well-being. Seeing his self-destruction, Endeavor would command Toya to stop. He told him that no matter how hard he tried, he could never become the hero his father wanted. All this did, however, was light an even stronger flame within Toya, who became obsessed with becoming the hero of his father's dream. It was this unhealthy obsession that would lead to that fateful day. Toya would regularly sneak out and challenge himself to turn up the heat of his flames, fighting through unbearable pain. If he could just power up that little bit more, then maybe that was the key to getting his father's attention. This reached the point where he would turn his flames up so high that he completely lost control. Toya's flames overwhelmed him and decimated everything in sight. including himself. His life would be lost with nobody there to save him. The Todoroki family's grief was unbearable. Even Endeavor carried the heavy burden of regret, the weight of his actions finally catching up to him. His family would only detest him more. If only he had taken up the responsibility of being a father the way he should have been from the start. If only he had been able to look at Toya and accept him for everything he was. This didn't have to happen. Though broken, they still could have been a family. It was this sin that they couldn't move on from, no matter how hard they tried. But, just like before, Endeavor wouldn't back down. He again would fight to make the impossible a reality. Ironically, it was with one simple phrase that Endeavor would gradually begin to shift the narrative. Just watch me. The very same acknowledgement his own son sought from him was the acknowledgement he now demanded from the public. This irony was now an obstacle unlike anything Endeavor had ever encountered before. As he persisted, things surprisingly began to improve. The gap between him and All Might didn't feel as overwhelming as it did before. It felt like his dream was finally within reach. Endeavor had mended his relationship with Shoto, started to rebuild his family, and actively changed his public perception by proving to the people that he truly was the courageous hero they needed. Things were finally starting to heal until the worst happened. By the end of the Paranormal Liberation War, the mysterious Darby would reveal himself and stand before all the battle-worn heroes, proclaiming the unfathomable. Before Endeavor, in front of the entire world, Enji Todoroki's demons would return as a monster of a man. His name, Toya Todoroki. This moment is fucking crazy. This person who was thought dead was not only alive, but now an evil monster. He now walked a path of hatred, carrying his withering, decaying body along purely out of spite. Because his father had rejected him, Toya renounced everything his father stood for. His light had flickered out, and he embraced the darkness. This upbringing was a living hell, a loveless place shaped by pain, anguish, and misery. A place that proved the hero Endeavor was nothing more than a fraud. Toya had returned for a sole purpose: to make Endeavor's life a living hell. This revelation is heartbreaking for the Todoroki family. They can no longer run away from this regret. And while Endeavor recognizes this as his own failure, his former wife Rei also feels the burden of responsibility. In fact, Toya's whole family had told him that he would be better off trying to be something else. So they finally unite as a family and stand together not against Toya, but with him. They see their shortcomings and recognize what needs to be done. Together, they would extinguish the hatred in his heart. Together, they would save him. Except there was still one massive hurdle to overcome. Whether it be because of his regret or his cowardice, Endeavor couldn't face his son. He didn't know how to confront his past, but there was no other way, forcing brothers to face off in a final confrontation. This battle is some peak stuff coming out of My Hero Man. The action and dialogue are great, but just the raw emotional vulnerability is easily the best part. To put this into perspective, Toya's wrath is so great that he is actively destroying his body, burning his flames harder than ever before. Like he is seconds away from becoming a human ashtray. Behind that malicious blaze, though, is a son jealous of his brother because he was the one with all the attention. He was the one always seen by their father, and he was the one who was always wanted. If Toya could defeat his father's perfect creation, then surely he would now be undeniable. He would finally prove that he was everything Enji said he couldn't be. However, even though he pushes himself beyond his physical limits, it's not enough to defeat Shoto. He lies broken and bested, yet his spiteful heart won't let him stay down. Changing targets, he moves on to confront his father yet again, who remains frozen at the sight of his long-lost son. In his stead, however, arrives his family, bravely and selflessly attempting to cool Toya's raging flames. Though Toya reminds them of their failures, they persevere through the pressure and the pain, not only to save the people evacuating from the war zone, but also for a chance to talk with him. The family acknowledges their failures and outwardly recognizes that they are responsible for his transformation. Even Endeavor steps up and finally confronts his greatest failure. The reunited family slowly chipping away at Dabi's hatred and finding Toya inside. Shoto strikes the decisive blow. The family repents before a dying Toya, wishing things could have been different, wishing that they could have been a better family. After a lifetime like feeling he had something to prove, Endeavor's wall of bravado disappears. Endeavor was never going to win this battle, but Enji could. No amount of strength or willpower could overcome Toya's hatred, as it was only through Enji's weakness that he was able to defeat his son. Ironically, his weakness would become his greatest strength. And after years of running away from the past, the Todoroki family finally unites to save Toya from himself. Fast forward to after the final war. The Todoroki family reunites, the wounds of their battle still fresh. Endeavor has taken catastrophic damage in his battle against All For One and Toya. He is effectively retired, unable to move without the aid of his family. Together, for one final purpose, they go and meet Toya, now barely clinging on to life, still filled with a deep rage for his family. Even after everything, he still isn't able to let it go. He looks at his father with disgust, loathing the man that had tossed him aside. This time, however, things were different. After Toya weakly expresses his anger, Enji speaks, letting Toya know that the past was something that they could never change, that he did hurt everybody, that he was a villain inside their home. There was nothing he could do to change the past, but he could still do something about the future. He decided to spend the rest of his life atoning for the harm he had caused, no matter how impossible. He promises to spend every day of Toya's remaining time with him, even if all he ever heard was Toya's hatred. All he ever wanted was his father's acceptance, and Endeavor would finally grant Toya that wish. At last, you can see the humanity pour back into Toya, his anger subsiding. As his emotions spike, the doctors decide to put him away for his safety. Shoto then asks one last question to his brother. What's your favorite food? After a long silence with no expected answer, Toya's weak voice calls out, soba. Fucking shit, they tied it all back together. They didn't make the fact that Shoto's favorite food being soba was useless. They made it into one of the most heartfelt and emotional moments of the series. And with that ends the tragic saga of the Todoroki family. Throughout My Hero, there have always been these constant reminders of how these heroes, these gods amongst men, are still merely human. We see time and time again how they fail and falter, either choosing to confront themselves or blame their circumstances. This is undoubtedly one of My Hero's best showings, a story of weakness involving its most powerful family. It shows that even the people we worship and idolize still have their flaws. How beyond that spectacle can be somebody who is broken and hurts the people around them. How sometimes the hardest ones to help can be the ones closest to us. Yet, I think it does something else very important as well. It shows the consequences of choice, good and bad. This is especially true in the instance of Toya, a victim of circumstance born to a family with a father who relinquished him. However, he could only call himself a victim for so long, as he eventually began to make his own choices, decisions that would cause the same kind of torment brought to him. Additionally, this story also shows that people are more than their worst decisions. It's when that world is opened up and we see the bigger picture that we can look introspectively to see our faults and face them head on. We can then atone for the pain that we've caused in our lives and mend the bridges that we've broken. Incidentally, this becomes more of a challenge than anything we'd ever faced before. The biggest impact here, though, has to be the power of bearing your weakness, being humble, and humiliating yourself for the sake of others. It's these moments we can find the most powerful version of ourselves and allow the betterment we strive for. I haven't haven't talked much about Bakugo, but his arc in this story is maybe the most beautiful of this series. I think introducing him as this bashful, prideful character, one you have to question if he has the heart of a hero or not, is the perfect start. He is unwilling to work with others, belittles people for their weakness, and everything he does seems to be done out of spite instead of selflessness. He constantly seeks validation, showing off to everybody to affirm his superiority. Even the League of Villains looked at this guy and thought, dude, this guy's evil as fuck. However, despite that cold, callous exterior, at his core, he may be the most heroic one. From a young age, everybody knew Bakugo was gifted and that he would go on to do great things. But simply being great wasn't enough for him. He needed to be better than everyone. He needed to become the greatest hero. This is why Bakugo felt insulted whenever anybody approached his level. He would put in more work than anyone, fight harder than anyone, and make the toughest decisions because that's what the best hero would do. There was no challenge he couldn't overcome, no glass ceiling he couldn't break. Even if it meant discarding those around him, even if it meant breaking himself beyond the point of repair, he would not quit. So when he sees Midoriya, a kid with no quirk that he saw as lesser, it sickens him to see the same kid catching up to him. It bothered Bakugo so much that someone would dare to challenge his worth that it led to a bitter rivalry between the two. They could never meet face to face without butting heads because, after all, he was the one who originally coined Midoriya's nickname of Deku. Midoriya, however, also refuses to quit. He gives everything he has into becoming a hero, the best hero, an even greater hero than Bakugo could ever be. He promises that he wouldn't let Deku mean a person who can't do anything. And the more progress Midoriya makes, the angrier Bakugo becomes. Throughout their time together, Bakugo constantly questions both Midoriya and All Might. Seeing their connection, he searches for the answer of what they mean to each other. What's interesting though is what happens when he starts to figure out the truth. It's in this process that the battle between All Might and One for All happens, with the result being the end of the symbol of peace. Afterwards, there's a scene where the teachers from UA go around asking the parents of the students to live on campus in some newly built dorms. It feels comedic when the teachers discover how batshit some of these parents are, but I digress. Bakugo has a moment with All Might afterwards and simply asks him what Deku means to him. All Might hesitates for a moment, but says that he is a student, nothing more. Bakugo turns away, disappointed. He could no longer deny what he's felt for so long. For as long as he could remember, Bakugo idolized All Might. It was he who inspired Bakugo to walk the path of a hero and push himself to unimaginable heights. It was he who motivated Bakugo to go beyond what everyone thought possible of him because he knew he could be better. Despite all of that, All Might still didn't choose him. He instead chose the one person Bakugo detested more than anybody. The rival that haunted him simply because he existed. All Might chose Midoriya. This all sets the stage for the boiling point, with both their emotions spilling over in an explosive showing. Bakugo challenges Midoriya to assure him that it didn't matter how strong he got, he would always come out on top. He would always be the better hero. This is the first time we see a bit of weakness in Bakugo. He tried so desperately to bottle it up, but there was always something tearing away at him. Something that revealed more of who he really was. Beyond the anger and jealousy was a sole emotion consuming Bakugo: self-imposed responsibility. He was supposed to be the greatest, the strongest, the best, but he couldn't save himself, his classmates, or All Might. He thought this weakness was the reason the world had now lost the symbol of peace. More than that, he felt responsible for the downfall of his idol. He couldn't bear the overwhelming pain it brought him, eventually breaking down in front of Midoriya. This moment really sets the stage for Bakugo as a character that goes well beyond your typical rival. All this resentment and bitterness Bakugo carried stemmed from something much deeper. And that truth would reveal itself when Deku is the one who needs help. Following the battle with Shigaraki, Deku goes rogue. He recognizes that as long as he carries the power of One for All, he's a target, and his presence threatens everybody around him. So he decides to fight this battle alone and leaves UA to protect his peers. This decision takes its toll on Deku as he continues to push himself further and further to end this battle on his own. You can feel his exhaustion. He's well beyond his limit, yet there is no end in sight. And this transforms Deku into somebody unrecognizable. His heart is in the right place, but he's going about it the wrong way. You can see this visibly manifested as his aura becomes unwieldy and threatening. The people he saves now look at him in fear. Class 1A knows the weight of the world he's carrying on his shoulders, and after all Midoriya has done for them, they need to be there for him. Class 1A throws everything they have at Deku. They didn't care if they were in danger, it didn't matter. Midoriya had cultivated a bond that helped show every class member that there was more to each of them, that their potential was unlimited. They wanted to repay the favor, to show him that they are the heroes they have become thanks to him. But their words fall on deaf ears. And as much as it pains him to push them away, Midoriya has already made up his mind. It takes everything they have to get him just to hear them out and tell them that they want to be by his side. This is when Bakugo arrives. Unlike past interactions, Bakugo is not approaching with anger or resentment, but with remorse. After all these years, it was time for Bakugo to reveal his truth. The whole reason he loathed Midoriya so much was because he thought Deku was a better hero. Even at an early age, Midoriya, quirkless with nothing special to his name, put other people before him time and time again. Though Bakugo was heralded as this bastion of strength, Midoriya never once hesitated to help him. And that changed something in Bakugo. He may have had the greater ability and the stronger willpower, but he knew deep down that Midoriya was something more. The next thing he knew, Bakugo now faced his shadow. He was left chasing, worrying if he would ever truly catch up. At this moment, he sees that Deku isn't that beacon of hope he so desperately wants to be. So, for the first time dropping his pride and letting go of his anger, Bakugo stops calling Deku by the name he used to belittle him and calls him by his real name, Izuku. He confesses his weakness to Midoriya and apologizes for everything. Casting strength aside, Bakugo shows humility and further proves the power of vulnerability. The fact that we are human allows us to persevere, and our weakness can be the source of our strength. This was no longer the story of how Deku became the greatest hero. It was now how they all became the greatest heroes.
So, fun fact, I actually stopped writing for this section because I wanted to wait until the end of the show to finish this script. And now that I know how Bakugo's saga ends, this shit is baller as fuck.
I think a lot of what works about Bakugo is how he goes through this arc to find forgiveness in not only others, but in himself, and better his character to be that hero he wants to be. After being the end of All Might, he fights for redemption, forcing himself to confront any and all hurdles that come his way. This would all lead up to the final battle, where he and several other heroes fight against the forces of evil and try to bring about the end to their twisted ways. Bakugo finds himself face to face against the new symbol of fear, the relentless Shigaraki. He and his allies give everything they have to take him down, but Shigaraki's power is far too great. They get overwhelmed, beaten, and left with a casualty. And that casualty was Bakugo. During this fight, another is raging. After All For One has taken down his foes, he finds himself before his old rival once more, All Might. Despite no longer having his powers, All Might becomes this funny-looking mech and gives hell to a weakening One For All. Thanks to Ares' reversal quirk, each fatal blow turns the clock back for All For One. Even still, All For One's hubris wouldn't allow him to pass up this opportunity to finally take up his revenge and tear the symbol of peace apart limb from limb. The battle is fierce, with All Might throwing everything he has at All For One and losing countless hours of his precious life. Even Stain gets involved, sacrificing himself to give All Might more of that crucial time he needs to buy for the others holding Shigaraki off. Unfortunately, All For One would prove to be too much to handle, and All Might is completely defeated, his death imminent. All For One shows the heroes the mangled body of the once greatest hero, giving them a look as he is seconds away from tearing him in two. This time, there's nobody to save him. It really feels like this is the end. That is, until one last hope reawakens. I can't begin to tell you how unbelievably hyped this moment was when Bakugo rises up after being brought to the brink of death. For so long, he felt like he was the reason there was no more All Might. Because of his weakness, the world lost its greatest strength. But now was the time for redemption. This time, he would save All Might. This reawakened Bakugo carried an immense spirit that overwhelmed All for One. This person was completely unlike the Bakugo we knew before. His light shined brighter, more fiercely. All for One sees this and starts panicking, feeling fear from the indomitable spirit that stood between him and his dream. Betting it all on one shot, All for One unleashes an unholy amalgamation of quirks, firing himself at Shigaraki. Bakugo readies himself, stands before this wicked attack, and hits it with everything he has left, mirroring the very finishing move that All Might performed on All for One in their final battle. In the wake, All for One lies defeated, humbled, and humiliated, eventually running out of time and fading away. After all this time, Bakugo finally did it. He had finally made up for his past and redeemed himself, saving the person he held so dear while finally relying on others to make his dreams come true. In the end, he finally proved to everybody what he truly is and what he has always been: a hero. I've pointed it out time and time again, but this is precisely the kind of character I love so much in media. The ones who struggle to become something more than themselves, never letting others define who they are or who they want to be. They push themselves harder and put more faith in themselves than anybody else because they have to. If they don't believe in themselves, who will? What would all the blood, sweat, and tears amount to? They sacrifice more than anyone, and yet it makes them look selfish. The reality is that they simply aspire to something so much that they're willing to give up anything to achieve it. There comes a point in each of these people's lives when they come to realize that their ascension to the top is a heavy burden. After pushing away people for so long, they come to realize that the difficult thing to do now is to believe in others and let them help you evolve. It's always a beautiful piece of storytelling that never fails to captivate me, mostly because it showcases the most challenging battle any of us will ever face: ourselves. You are always the one constantly doubting yourself, critiquing yourself, telling yourself you're not good enough. This mindset consumes us and makes us start losing sight of ourselves. The battle is only won when we're able to accept ourselves for who we are, flaws and all, and open ourselves up to a potential we've always had inside. Oh, and by the way, this arc was so emotional that it made Michael B. Jordan cry, which I thought was hilarious.
I can't believe it. Young man, you're alive. How did you get back up? You had a hole in your chest. You were dead.
I took a Flintstones vitamin.
Young man, I need you to come here. I would come to you, but I'm out of Percocet. I want you to have this. It's my robot arm. It's broken as fuck and it doesn't do anything anymore. But it looks really cool, and I think it'd be kind of funny.
No, I don't get it. This can't be happening. I spent all this time putting together my resources, biding my time, just to stick it to the old man's arms. I had spent the last 16 years practically frothing at the teeth just at this moment. I even got that quirk that gave me the double-twisted pussy just as a backup. And still, they keep getting in my way. These heroes should be nothing more than the ants beneath my boot, waiting to be squashed. So why is everything falling apart? How could these insignificant words tear my dream apart? Oh no. I know this feeling. I have to get to Shigaraki now! This feeling! It's just like... Just like the Horseman incident!
So before we get into the final section of this video, it's worth exploring some other thoughts I have about this series in this cleverly titled section. The first thing is something worth talking about with any adaptation, and that's the animation. I talked about the manga before, but what I didn't mention is that Hirokoshi's art is absurdly intricate, detailed, and incredibly expressive. God, it makes me beyond jealous that he can create these pieces that not only look beautiful, but actually communicate so much to the story. It's not an every once in a while thing either. The manga is just flooded with fantastic art. I could start to tell you about some of my favorite panels, but we'd be here for another hour, and I already know I'm testing a lot of people's patience right now. So I'll probably just have a slideshow of some of his best from the manga and his illustrations on screen. But why do I mention this here? Because, quite frankly, Studio Bones does not hold a candle to this feeling and emotion that Hirokoshi's art portrays, for the most part. I could go through an endless sea of so-so adaptation, but I think there's one example that really puts this all into perspective. Fair warning, this is gonna be the nerdiest, nitpickiest shit you've ever heard in your life. So when I hear you complaining about it in the comments, I will see you and I will not listen. Suck my toes. There's a crazed face that Shigaraki drops in the shopping mall. The manga's version of Shigaraki's expression just signifies so much. You look at that face and you see the wild, crazed contortion, and every little scratch, crack, and wrinkle tells you a story of how this person lives. Maybe most importantly, those eyes stare off with a cold, vicious gaze. A realization that everything that has gone wrong in his life is because of All Might. This face is his discovery that he isn't to blame for anything. It was All Might's fault. Now, in order to achieve everything he wants, he must end All Might. This is rich visual storytelling. Meanwhile, in the anime, Shigaraki's expression is one that says, I just shitted myself. I can tell that Hirokoshi designed so many of these panels with visual storytelling in mind. And the anime falters because the panels get lost in translation. It's disappointing because if these moments had been properly adapted, they would have had 10 times the emotional impact. I mean, just to put this all into perspective, the manga artwork is so well done that it makes the gentle criminal arc compelling. It's just worth noting that the animation in the early stages is kind of weak. Lots of wonky expressions, proportions, and animation in general that just becomes really distracting when you catch on. Like, something just feels off whenever Twice is on screen. That said, when Studio Bones really wants to go out, they definitely know how. Which makes it such a shame to look at these gorgeous panels and only see them half-baked in the anime. I'm guessing this is what it feels like to be a fan of One Punch Man. What's crazy is that this is improved upon as the seasons go along. Which, thank God they did, because the pinnacle of these stories really needed to be as close as possible to these panels if they were going to hit the same. Even then, I think that's really not enough. I feel like it should be on the adaptation to put their all into not just remaking those images, but finding ways to build off them. For example, Chainsaw Man Razorhead. This movie takes the already stellar manga and cranks it up by adding moving subtleties that you simply can't have on the pages of a book. It's masterfully done and something I really wanted to sneak in here because, God, it is so good. The good news is that Bones seemed to really want to pull out all the stops with the final season, so the usual production staff went to the wayside and let Bones Films take over. This means we finally get the majestic imagery translated in a way that feels right. Each episode really does just feel like eye candy that you can't look away from because every frame is striking, bold, and dynamic. Thank you, Studio Bones Films. That last season is very pretty. Now, let's talk about the UA Trader arc and why it's so good. Can we talk about the UA Trader arc for a second? Because this is doo-doo feces. I mentioned before that the series has a problem with its comedic relief characters being really uninteresting, and the series, to its credit, does do something about that. Denki becomes less comedic relief and more reliable as he finds his way and actually becomes a pivotal part of the Paranormal Liberation War arc. God, that is hard to say. Mineta is still very much Mineta, but grows to become less of a coward and rises to the occasion against foes who he has no right going up against. Aoyama, on the other hand, just gets really fucking weird. The setup is that, following the first few villain incidents in the series, the teachers work out that there is likely a mole on the inside who is leaking information for the villains to get the jump on the heroes. This is something that the series doesn't tackle again for a long time, and was a genuine curiosity that I figured they would reveal down the line once the villains showed their hand. This is more or less what happened, but I really don't think I could have ever guessed who was going to be the traitor at UA. Like, I get it, you know? You want to make it an unexpected reveal that nobody could have ever guessed and make it into a Watch Mojo top 10 anime betrayals list. But of all people, Aoyama? Let's start with the obvious. It is so hard to buy into this because the series has been making an active effort to show you this character and tells you not to take him seriously. The one time he had a vague storyline with Midoriya, it ended with him shitting himself on the gym floor. Like, how am I supposed to buy and invest into this character? Plus, the narrative just didn't put in the work to make this a satisfying reveal. The only real hint being how Aoyama mentioned that his quirk isn't compatible with his body, which, if you're a particularly smart boy, means you could somehow work out that All For One gave him that power. Even still, I mean, that just sounds asinine, doesn't it? Like, trying to envision a scene with All For One and Can't Stop Twinkling just really doesn't work, does it? Like, imagine in Dragon Ball Super if Monaka was the one who slaughtered Jiren's mentor. Funny as it is, it just sounds a little too silly. Then it gets even sillier when Aoyama is caught and confesses to his crimes before a very lenient Class 1A. The only good thing about this is what it leads to, and that's the final war arc, which easily contains the best that MHA has to offer. Oh, I feel like it's probably worth talking about this too while we're at it. I'm not entirely sure that the Toga and Uruaka storyline worked all that well. Hell, if I'm being honest, it kind of feels like most of the female characters in this story are pretty underdeveloped despite some of them having some really great moments. For example, Mirako just has a scene in the Paranormal Liberation War where she fought a bunch of high-end Nomu alone. It's pretty kick-ass. That said, there's just not a ton of development to be had here, and it's kinda sad.
Boo.
Character development.
Bad boobies. Boobies good.
But back on track, I feel like there was something interesting going on with Toga in the fact that her storyline boils down to her wanting to find acceptance for who she is because everyone she's ever known has rejected her for being who she is. So she's only able to find comfort in a group of people who overlook the flaws of her character and accept her anyway. Uraraka's saga with her being this slow realization that she wasn't a villain because she wanted to be, but because the League was the only place that understood her. She would eventually come around to accepting Toga too, and the conclusion that comes with that is a pretty great and emotional moment. That said, it's kinda hard to overlook the fact that she is a murderer whose joy comes from taking people's blood when those people clearly didn't want to get sucked. So this ends up becoming a play on the sympathetic villain trope that didn't really land with me or many other people from the looks of it. Okay, I need to talk about the pacing of this series. I had this moment watching the final season of the anime and reading halfway through the manga when the thought crossed my mind, dude, how do we get from this to this? Keep in mind, the events of My Hero take place over the span of a year, and it seems like just way too quick of an advancement. It's just kind of awkward when we go from fighting Gentle Criminal and doing team battle training to fighting a threat who takes down America's #1 hero. Might I add, I really wish we got some more time with Star and Stripe, but I get why we didn't. Her quirk is overpowered as fuck, and you could feel how hard Hirokoshi had rode himself into a corner with that one. Luckily, the pace changes for the better, especially since the beginning of the series is a lot slower. Still, it doesn't excuse the fact that it could have been paced a little more properly to make some of these builds feel more earned and worthwhile. Alright, how much more miscellaneous can we get? Mr. Smiley, despite being an anime-only OVA character, has become one of the main things I think about when I think about this series. And I think that's a problem. Like, seriously, why did the lady have to moan his name so sexily?
Mr. Smiley?
Speaking of, is Lady Nagant allowed? Like, brother, seeing her makes my feeble slug brain fire more neurons than it can handle. Oh god, I don't know how I haven't touched this yet, but the music for this series is so damn good. I was a little annoyed at season 1 for having these 3 tracks they played endlessly, but one of them was You Say Run, and that track, alongside many different versions of it, are all hype as hell. Fun fact, that track just always brings me back to this one video, some guy yelling, "Sex! Sex! するんじゃねえ俺自身が真のセックスになるんだ I'm not gonna sit here and pretend to know how to analyze music all that well. I'm pretty sure there are plenty of other videos that do that better than I ever could, but the important part is that the music goes a long way in elevating a scene and pushing the emotions to the next level. This is the kind of music that adaptations dream of, and for that, I have to give some major props to composer Yuki Hayashi. Seriously, there are some absolutely incredible tracks, especially by the end of the series, that I just jam out to on a regular basis because they are that good. On a similar note, I don't think there's a single bad voice acting performance from anybody here. God, the delivery of some of these lines have become iconic at this point. If I was to rattle off a list of the voice actors and their accomplishments with this series, we'd easily be here for another hour. Something that neither you nor I want at this point. Ultimately though, damn, what a fantastic job in that department. All right, now with that out of the way, let's finally move on to the final conflict. Well, we finally arrived. For a video about My Hero Academia, I think only I could take an hour before talking about the main character. Although it's mostly because Midoriya is probably the most complicated character to talk about here. I think what makes it all so challenging is that he is the one meant to carry the series forward, narratively, thematically, and so on. Overall, he's a pretty well-built character that's easy to root for. His story is that of an underdog climbing the ranks through adversity, finding any means necessary to achieve his dreams while never compromising on his ideals. In other words, he's adorkable, and what's not to love about that? That alone doesn't make a character engaging though. What can really make a character like this go from snore to hardcore is when you forcibly challenge that unshakable foundation. What many stories do to give their lead characters depth and nuance is present the ever-pressing moral dilemma. This concept is when a character is presented with a choice, often an ultimatum, that challenges a character's principles, forces them into a box, and/or takes something away from them. For example, you could buy that embarrassing ass Deku body pillow, but then you'd have to suffer the consequences of losing the respect of your family and loved ones. Yo, why is his foot out like that? It can be an effective hook to make a character who was boring as fuck beforehand become one that is genuinely complex and engaging. Easily one of the greatest examples of this is Attack on Titan, where characters who start off as these hopeful dreamers eventually go further into a shade of gray as their morals are constantly challenged. Then there are properties like Chainsaw Man that flip this idea on its head and take an interesting spin on it. How do you present a moral dilemma to a character who has no morals? Well, you craft a story where those morals build up, and choices suddenly become difficult when they otherwise wouldn't have been. In other words, you make a narrative about a guy trying to get his dick wet. Also, just since we're on the subject, the fact that Chainsaw Man has a cameo in the My Hero manga is sick. I love it when mangakas do nifty little collaborations like this. If only Chainsaw had eaten the Cringe devil, huh? Wow, I am terribly off topic, aren't I? Point being, this is a great way to build characters up and is something that is often presented to Midoriya in his struggles. He's complicated to talk about because when he's presented with door 1 or door 2, he's the kind of character who opens up door 3. I think it's important to point out that this isn't a bad thing at all. In fact, it just fits the show's narrative. Let's take the Overhaul battle for instance, just because I really do think it is that good. Nighteye has looked into Midoriya's future and he sees tragedy awaiting him at the nasty, gangly hands of Overhaul. He is then presented with two options. One, he can run away and let Overhaul get away with Eri, living to fight another day, or two, fight Overhaul in a meaningless effort and meet his demise. That said, what ends up happening is Midoriya twists fate by taking down Overhaul and rescuing Eri. It makes sense though. He has to win the day no matter what. It essentially ties back into that strongest archetype of character we previously talked about. It's very prototypical of the hero story. That said, for every X-Men, there is an apocalypse. For every Superman, there is a doomsday. There comes a point when that third option simply isn't there. And the person who never compromised on their ideals now has to do what they never could have imagined. And that was what would make or break this entire hero's journey for me. What would now happen when the person who wants to save everyone goes up against somebody who doesn't want to be saved? Well, I think now is a good time to talk about Midoriya's greatest challenge, Shigaraki. Shigaraki is fascinating because, well, as I've mentioned before, he's kind of a fucking loser at first. There's not really much to get behind with him since his main defining character trait is that he really hates society because it's cringe. The story tries its best to give him more substance, such as the revelation that he's actually the grandson of Nana Shimura, the predecessor to All Might, but that reveal comes at such an odd point in the story that, for me at least, it just landed with a thud. Plus, it didn't help that we were introduced to other villains like Overhaul that were more compelling right from the get-go. But then, we actually start to get some compelling layers to his character. In the wake of the Paranormal Liberation War, Shigaraki began to remember his origin. Tomura Shigaraki was once a boy named Tenko Shimura, a hero-loving child like any other. Before, just the thought of heroism was once enough to make his heart dance with glee as he aspired and dreamt to one day be like those he too idolized. Sadly, his household was cursed. His father was the son of Nana Shimura, who decided not to raise her child to fill her shoes, sparing him from a life fraught with danger. She thought she could save him from facing everyday evil, hoping he'd live a normal life. But she was wrong. Hatred brewed in her son's heart, a resentment for anything heroic. All he ever saw was an absent mother that would rather dedicate her life to total strangers than spend any time with her son. That spite seeped into the next generation, making Tenko's father hide anything having to do with his mother, scolding his children whenever they mentioned becoming heroes. It was this negativity that caused Tenko's downward spiral, the discovery of his grandmother's heroic identity being the spark that would eventually cause the unthinkable to happen. Tenko's quirk would ultimately develop into a power that rotted everything he touched, a manifestation of the pain he carried. He would use this pain to destroy his entire family, unintentionally at first, but then it was intentional. Very intentional. In the aftermath, he would live in isolation, causing fear in the streets. Bystanders would tremble at the sight of Tenko, hoping for a hero to save him. But that hero never came. Instead, he would be greeted by none other than All for One, leading Tenko Shimura to take the new mantle of Tomura Shigaraki, the one who would destroy everything. All of this pain and dysfunction stems from one of the greatest failures by one of the greatest heroes. Now, a sad backstory still isn't enough to make me buy into a self-admitted LoL player. What got me interested in Shigaraki was his perspective. See, the important thing about Shigaraki's journey here is how he evolves beyond someone who simply seeks destruction. In putting together his gaggle of goons hell-bent on global chaos, he accidentally creates something of a family. He finds himself the responsible leader of a group who all share the same goal. And it's for this reason that characters like Spinner come around to believing in his vision, because they see him not only as their leader, but also as their friend. Yes, Shigaraki may have been a villain, but to the League of Villains, he was the gleaming light leading them forward. He realized being their leader meant more than simply guiding them. He had to become their hero. He carried their hopes and dreams, pushing himself through squalor and anguish, letting nobody get in his way. This was now the impossible task that Midoriya had to face. Their battle is great. While neither of them being willing to compromise is effective, I think the best part about this fight is their inner conflicts. Midoriya, despite having seen all the destruction at the hands of Shigaraki, sees something in him. Having seen All for One forcibly take over Shigaraki's body in the past, Midoriya couldn't help but see somebody in need of saving. He saw all the hatred Shigaraki had built up, the disillusionment he held for this hero society, all stemming from the fact that it failed him with nobody to save him. He was a product of this world's shortcomings, and, worse still, became the prime target of this world's greatest evil. Whether he would admit it or not, Shigaraki was a victim. Midoriya would then throw everything he had into saving this one person, including the precious quirk he had worked so hard to make his. On the other side, Shigaraki's wall is rapidly collapsing. As much as he wants to show that he is a terror to bring about an age of chaos to the world, he can't escape his origin. He's still held on to the trauma of being a scared little boy, walking aimlessly through the streets in the hopes that somebody, anybody would reach their hand out to him and tell him everything was okay. No matter how much he tried to hide it, Shigaraki had carried that weakness inside of him all along. It would be this very weakness that Midoriya would focus on to finally extend that helping hand. It's his smile and optimism restored type beat. With that comes a great moment where Shigaraki and Midoriya simply talk. Dude, get a fucking muffler, what the fuck? Shigaraki would affirm that no matter if his hatred had been stamped out, he would always be a destroyer. Not because that was his fate, but because it was the path he had to walk in order to be the hero his friends needed. But the battle was not over. There was one last twist. All for One emerges within Shigaraki's broken psyche and takes control, revealing the true depths of his wicked ploy. Shigaraki wasn't a victim of circumstance. His entire existence had been manipulated, guided, and decided by All for One, orchestrating all these events to give him his next body. In other words, Shigaraki got trolled. That sounded funny in my head, but I'm keeping that in. All for One unleashes a malicious onslaught upon the entirety of Class 1A, resulting in the anime version of the portal scene from Avengers Endgame. I'm sure I'm not the only one to make that joke, but just tell me I'm wrong, damn it. Together, they give Midoriya, having just a single shred of his quirk remaining, an opening to vanquish All for One for good. All for One barely holds himself together through spite, but his rage isn't enough. He stands no chance against the combined power of those who hope for a brighter future. As Midoriya delivers the fatal blow, the final part of All for One's story plays out as well. That's right, as if this section couldn't be more overblown as it is already, I'm sure my script editor, Jariv, is gonna love me for making him read 50 pages of this shit. I'm sorry, Jariv. I thought it would be funny to see if I could get this script to 20,000 words. Yes, I do regret it. Let's talk about All for One for a minute. See, just like many of the other characters in the series, he starts off with having a single fundamental character trait that defines him. That trait being, of course, that he's evil. By the series' end though, there is a little additional layer to his story that I think was the perfect dynamic to add. Yes, this guy is a supervillain evil bad guy who is mean and kind of a literal dickhead. However, aside from his pursuit to find another body, All for One has another goal. Long ago, it was he who brought about One for All by giving his weak, powerless brother, Yoichi, a quirk so that they could be together. However, Yoichi's vision was far different from his brother's. He wanted to help people, to save people, to bring about a future worth living instead of bringing about its destruction. So he stood up to his brother, denying his warped vision. And since then, All for One had been hunting One for All. He wanted to steal this quirk back, not only because it was the only power that could stop him, but also because he cared for Yoichi. Despite being a detestable, irredeemable villain, All for One loved his brother. In his final moments, he wanted nothing more than to simply be with him, pleading for Yoichi not to leave him. In the end, even the symbol of fear had a heart. If there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I really like the complicated stuff. I mean, not a day goes by where I don't listen to Mozart at 2 times speed, Bible, Chinese, full version, accelerated learning experience. It's kind of obscene. What I mean to say is that I have the most fun talking about things I have mixed feelings about. That said, My Hero has got to be one of the most complicated reviews I've ever done. Starting off as this neat little idea with a lot of potential, to being that one clip of tomatoes being thrown at Squidward.
It's worth every penny.
All the way back to being the highest rated anime of 2025 by a landslide. As I mentioned before, I never really saw myself making a My Hero video, but it's become a story that's undeniably something that, to my own amazement, I would recommend to others. I know there will be those in bad faith that will demean it and tell you it has no value compared to other stories they claim superior, which I've always thought that elitist mindset is pretty lame. You don't just have to like one thing, brother. It's okay to take in some cringe every once in a while. But seriously though, does this have the same impact as Berserk or Chainsaw Man for me? No, certainly not. Although it's pretty apparent that it's not trying to be that. My Hero Academia wants to be its own thing, and it really finds its footing by the end. That said, there's still a lot of hurt that needs to be dealt with. The Todoroki family seeks to make up for lost time with Toya as he slowly passes. Uruaka has to live with the fact that she openly discouraged somebody who just wanted somebody to accept her. And because she couldn't see that sooner, she feels responsible for Toga's demise. Deku finally faced a decision where that third option was no longer available. He may have saved Shigaraki's spirit, but couldn't save the person from the evils that tormented him. They all demonstrate that being a hero, or simply being the best version of yourself, is no simple feat. The sacrifice, willpower, and determination to reach your pinnacle means you will have to encounter hardships that will challenge you along the way. All of these setbacks and failures are nothing more than tests. It's a constant question of if you'll settle for just being ordinary, or face yourself head on and fight to achieve your dreams. That's the magic of all of this. This series has so often shown us that beneath the veneer of a great hero is a person. It shows that even heroes are able to make costly mistakes, and even the idols we cherish still have skeletons in their closet. With the end of All for One, it takes the time to remind us that even the darkest shadows still carry some gleam of light inside. At the core of everything evil is the same human spirit that wills it along. It's no longer about good and evil or right and wrong. It has evolved to become a question of what it means to be human. The challenge of making mistakes, finding the courage to confront yourself, and to evolve and become better. This is demonstrated perfectly in the epilogue. In the very last episode, we see a practical repeat of Shigaraki's story. A boy who feels hopeless, alone, and afraid. He roams the streets with a horrifying look, scaring onlooking bystanders. He could have easily fallen down the same path of hatred brought about by the absence of a simple helping hand. Then, it happens. A regular person, not even a hero, reaches her hand out to the boy and tells him everything will be okay. She's here for him. It's a great moment that shows how one person's compassion inspired a change in others far beyond what many thought possible. Everybody is able to help because they now recognize that they don't need to be a hero to save someone.
So, I'm extremely tired and have to imagine you probably are too. Like seriously, why is this video about My Hero Academia 2 hours long? But the TLDR of this is that My Hero has seriously impressed me with its depth and honestly kind of inspired me to not lose out on faith as a creator. If Horikoshi, at his worst, could come back and flip the shonen genre on its head, what's stopping me or anybody else from doing the same? I think there are so many takeaways to have from both the story itself and the story around it, but I think maybe none of them resonate with me more than one. If you have a dream, chase it with everything you have. There will always be the doubters, there will always be those who want to see you fail, but you shouldn't let them limit your potential. Even if you don't think you have the natural born talent, even if you don't think you have the raw skill, you can still make something meaningful. You are the master of your own destiny, and only you can make something of it. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Even if you make cringe, that's okay. What does it matter if you're a cringe? Because guess what? Everybody's a little cringe. Wow, this is an awful ending.